Hi everybody, this is SAAD. Earlier today, across my Twitter feed, came an article that was a clear next contender for the Self-Flagellation by Proxy series on the SAAD TRUTH. So here I am. Belt of Self-Hate. Swatter of Self-Loathing. I brought both out because I can't decide which is the appropriate one for today's article. It's a long article, so bear with me. I was going to highlight different parts, but I thought, let me just read the whole thing. And so I will, of course, self-flagellate at opportune moments. So here we go. This is what's my... Oh, god damn, I can't get through the first couple of lines. What's my complicity? Talking white fragility with Robin DiAngelo. For well-intentioned white people doing anti-racist and social justice work, the first meaningful step is to recognize their fragility around racial issues and build their emotional stamina. White fragility author Robin DiAngelo breaks it down. When it comes to her well-established career as an anti-racist educator, Robin DiAngelo says, I kind of fell into it. Oh yeah, here we go. Years of deep learning, research, and mentorship from colleagues of color led her not only to understand that her whiteness has meaning, but also to become really good at explaining this to other white people. Remember, she got her mentorship from years of being mentored by people of color. The New York Times best-selling author of White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, sat down with Teaching Tolerance to discuss why working against one's fragility is a necessary part of white anti-racist work and why good intentions don't matter. In a nutshell, what is white fragility? Well, when I coined that term, the fragility part was meant to capture how little it takes to upset white people racially. For a lot of white people, the mere suggestion that being white has meaning will cause great umbrage. Certainly generalizing about white people will. Right now, me saying white people as if our race had meaning and as if I could know anything about somebody just because they're white will cause a lot of white people to erupt in defensiveness. And I think of it as a kind of weaponized defensiveness, weaponized tears, weaponized hurt feelings. And in that way, I think white fragility actually functions as a kind of white racial bullying. White fragility is a form of racist bullying now. We white people make it so difficult for people of color to talk to us about our inevitable but often unaware racist patterns and assumptions that most of the time they don't. People of color working and living in primary white environments take home way more daily indignations and slights and microaggressions than they bother talking to us about because their experience consistently is that it's not going to go well. In fact, they're going to risk more punishment, not less. They're going to now have to take care of the white person's upset feelings. They're going to have to be seen as troublemaker. The white person is going to withdraw, defend, explain, insist it had to have been a misunderstanding. And who is the primary audience for this book? My audience is the average well-intended white person who sees themselves as open-minded and yet cannot answer the question, what does it mean to be white? I think white progressives can be the most challenging because we tend to be so certain that it isn't us, and that certitude is problematic. It doesn't allow for humility, and to be direct, it's quite arrogant. So when we don't have to be receptive at all, I think the worst fear of a well-intended white person is that we should accidentally say something racist. But then how do we respond when someone lets us know, hey, you just accidentally said something racist? We respond with, how dare you? No, I didn't. This is a growing adult, a grown, functioning adult writing this. So for the degree that our identities are very attached to this idea of being free of racism, we're actually going to resist any of the critical examination that we need to be engaged in for our entire lives. Because every moment that I push against the socialization that I've received into a white supremacist culture, that culture is pushing right back at me. And that pressure is seductive. It's comfortable. There are social rewards for not challenging racism. White people perceive you as easier to get along with when you maintain white solidarity. So look, you got white supremacism, white nationalism, white fragility, white solidarity. In the book, you talk about the danger of assuming good intentions. Can you say a little bit about why assuming good intentions can actually be dangerous or harmful? I think intentions are irrelevant. It's nice to know you had good intentions, but the impact of what you did was harmful, and we need to let go of our intentions and attend to the impact to focus on that. A lot of groups that come together to have these discussions generate a list of guidelines or ground rules. And if we really looked critically at those, I think we would see that mostly they're about maintaining white comfort, another white term. They presume a lack of differential power in this space, but power relations are always at play. And people are in different power positions in that room. So the very things that make a white person feel comfortable may be exactly what says to a person of color, do not be authentic. Do not be yourself. Do not show your emotions. Do not get upset. Do not be angry. There's a question that's never failed me in this work to uncover how racism keeps reproducing itself despite all of the evidence we like to give for why it couldn't be us. And that question isn't, is this true or is this false? Was the person's intention good or not? We're never going to be able to come to an agreement on intentions. You cannot prove somebody's intentions. They might not even know their intentions. And if they weren't good, they're probably not going to admit it. The question I ask is, how does this function? The impact of the action is what is relevant. Change what you understand, what it means to be racist, and then act on that understanding. Because if you change your understanding, but you don't do anything different, then you are colluding. Emotional stamina? Foundationally, we have to change our idea of what it means to be racist. As long as you define a racist as an individual who intentionally is mean based on race, you're going to feel defensive. When I say you've been shaped by a racist system, that is inevitable that you have racist biases and patterns and investments, you're going to feel offended by that. You will hear it as a comment on your moral character. You're going to feel offended by that if you don't change how you interpret what I just said. And I would actually agree with anyone who felt offended when I say it is inevitable that you are racist if their definition of a racist is someone who means harm. When we understand racism as a system that we have been raised in and that its impact is inevitable, it's really not a question of good or bad. It's just, I have it. I've been socialized into it. And so, what am I going to do about it is really the question. And that's where I think maybe some guilt come in. Guilt. I'm guilty. I'm guilty. When you know that and you're still not going to do anything about it, I don't struggle with guilt because to the best of my ability, I'm trying to change my socialization. So let me be clear. Oh, this requires the belt. Sorry. As a result of being raised as a white person in this society, I have racist worldview. I have racist biases. I have developed racist patterns as a result, and I have investments in the system of racism. It's incredibly comfortable. It certainly helped me with the barriers that I do face, and I also have investments in not seeing anything I just said because of what it would suggest to me about my identity as a good person if I'm coming from the dominant definition, and what it would actually require of me in action. I don't feel guilty about it, but I do feel responsible for what I do with that socialization. You better appreciate what I'm doing. I'm starting to get open wounds because of all the self-flagellation. Change how you understand what it means to be racist, and then act on that understanding. Because if you change your understanding, but you don't do anything different, then you are colluding. You are guilty, whether you know it or not. Have you done work with teachers? How does your work specifically apply to K-12 teachers? Of course you have to work with teachers. You have to indoctrinate the young defenseless children from a very young age. Otherwise, how are they going to become brainwashed social justice idiots and morons? Absolutely. I am a professor, a former professor of education. Of course you are. The schools of education is where I heard Stalin got some of his best bullshit propaganda mechanisms from. I've worked many years in large teacher training programs. I think teachers are critical, and I think regardless of intentions, when you have an overwhelmingly white teaching force, we have a very racially homogeneous teaching force, you inevitably have the reproduction and dissemination of racism and white supremacy by virtue of the homogeneity. If you have homogeneous racial groups, that is itself a form of racial supremacy. We've grown up in segregation. We've never been taught or shown that to understand, much less have relationships across race, is something valuable. In fact, white people measure the value of our schools and neighborhoods by the absence of people of color. This person really exists in her own little fantasy world where she is in some KKK rally in 1920s. I know exactly what a good school is, and I know what we're talking about. We all know what we're talking about when we say good school versus bad school. We use race to measure those things. No, we use things like standardized tests. But of course, standardized tests are racist. But the implicit association test that determines that we're all racist, even those who are not racist, that's a good test. And now you take the product of that conditioning, that segregation, that narrow story, and you put that teacher in a position to socialize everyone's children. And that is a critical piece of the school to prison pipeline. Oh man, I'm getting tired. What message should the teaching tolerance community hear about white fragility and some of the next steps they can take as educators who have a profound responsibility to educate all children, including those who do not share their racial identity? Look, I studied mathematics, I studied psychology, I studied behavioral sciences, I've done it all. And I know that studying things like the distribution of prime numbers, or how neurons fire in your brain, you're not going to learn the same thing if you learn it from white people. This is why you need to have people of color also teaching pure mathematics or analysis of algorithms or neurosciences or psychology of decision making or evolutionary psychology. Remember, this whole idea of the scientific method serving as a way to remove our identities so that we can pursue truth unbiased by our personal identities. That's so old school. We now know that there are multiple ways of knowing. There's indigenous way of knowing. There's extremely good-looking Lebanese Jewish evolutionary psychologist way of knowing. They're all different kinds of ways of knowing. My truth is my truth. There is no the truth. We all have our respective truths. Hail to postmodernism. All right. 1, I want to say thank you. I do want to acknowledge that commitment and how essential it is. The message would be, don't ever be complacent in the face of it. Don't assume it isn't you. Don't just assume that you're not racist just because there is no racism in your heart. If you look deep enough into double structure and the double helix structure of your DNA, you will find racism, you pig. Just go ahead and assume that it is you who contributes to a painful environment for the people of color working with you. And then keep asking yourself how it might be you. Are you open to feedback? If indeed your impact was more problematic than you think it is, could somebody talk to you about that? I don't call myself a white ally. I'm involved in anti-racist work, but I don't call myself as an anti-racist white. Oh, the next sentence is really good. And that's because that is for people of color to decide whether in any given moment I'm behaving in anti-racist ways. Noble people of color, your destiny, my destiny, is in your hands. And notice that keeps me accountable. By the way, my wife is hovering outside, getting rather annoyed because we're supposed to go for a coffee before I return to my book. I hope this damn article finishes soon, or else there might be a divorce in my near future. It's for them to determine if in any given moment it's not a fixed location. I haven't made it or arrived. There's a history of harm between the institution of schooling and families of color. Our schools have not done right by children of color, and parents of color are delivering their precious, precious children into an institution where there's a deep history of harm. Parents of color, your children are going to schools where there might be white teachers. You may think that those white teachers are not racist. They're just engaging in white fragility. They're engaging in white comfort. People of color, don't send your children to places where there are white people. And that's not racist. So their suspicion, their fear and worry are rational. Absolutely. Black people say we don't want to send our children to schools that have white teachers. That's not racist. White people's existence, that's racist. You want to stop white supremacy? Stop reproducing white people. It's rational that they don't automatically trust the teacher. Of course it's rational. The teacher has a certain skin hue. It's a lighter skin hue. How can you trust that just off the bat? How could you know if they could truly teach you mathematics when they're white? Rather than get your back up because a parent has come to you and feels that you're treating their child differently based on race, respect that. Earn their trust, white people. I added the white people. Respond from a framework of 1, there's a good reason why they don't trust you. And 2, the nature of, voila, implicit bias is that it's not conscious. So be open to those conversations. The implicit assumption test will uncover the fact that you are racist, even though you've lived your life free of overt acts of racism, even though you know your heart is free of racism. The IAT will uncover that you are Mengele, you pig. There's a good reason why they don't. And 2, the nature of implicit bias is that it's not conscious. So be open to those conversations. Sorry, I already said that. I need to see you and what you need. And I must never forget that your race and my race and the interaction is shaping how I see you as an individual. There you have it, folks. This person doesn't think that she should be committed to an insane asylum or that she is herself profoundly racist. She thinks she's virtuous. She thinks she is moral. She thinks she's better than you because she flagellates all day, all night to demonstrate that she is worthy to exist in a world that has caused so much harm by white people on people of color. If you don't fight back against this cancer, you are recreating a new racist reality. Past racist realities were dreadful, the current racist reality is not the least bit better simply because you cloak it in faux moralizing. The DIE religion, diversity, inclusion, and equity, is a manifestation of this cancer. So what can you do to fight? Speak out against it. Don't accept it. You're being forced to do one of these bullshit tests in your company. Say, no, sorry. I know what my heart is, and I won't allow an Orwellian reality uncover my hidden racism. In whichever way you can fight against this cancer, do it. And now I am off for a coffee with my beautiful, gorgeous, and stunning wife, and then I will return to writing my book later this afternoon. Have a good day, everybody.